Hi folks, Steven here. So I am, as you can see, we're doing a live stream with Anne from Pikapi Podcast. This is going to be another one of our Pokemon music discussions. Tonight we're going to be discussing the music of Pokemon Colosseum for the GameCube. Before we get into the actual discussion, we are going to give things a few moments to give some updates and stuff like that, so folks do have a moment or two to join. If you do have any comments about anything we bring up about the game, or mostly it's going to be about is the music, of course, but we do a game discussion segment at the very end. Feel free to type that in the chat or as a comment on this video. We always appreciate that. And why don't you give a quick update about how you're coming, things are coming together on your end, on your podcast and whatnot.
If you've not listened before, I run Pikapi Podcast. It's a show about the Pokemon anime series, going through each episode one at a time and trying to make some sense out of Ash's crazy journey. Right now we are in the middle of Advanced Generation and just went through the Valley of Steel and met Torkoal. So if you're in for Advanced Generation hijinks, Hoenn was a super fun region for me. So
yeah, we're not only going to be starting soon, getting ahead of you in the movies, which we already did since we finished those up a year or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be getting ahead in the side games. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do next after that. As far as the side games will keep us busy well into next year for sure. So don't worry about that, folks at home. But I'm just saying, I'm not sure what other path we can go down. We'll come up with stuff. Don't worry.
So we got plenty of time for an idea to strike.
Yeah. Don't worry. We'll definitely have, between the games and the movies that release each year, we'll have enough to at least meet on a fair number of occasions. I'm not worried about that. All right. So let's see here. But just a reminder, I would hope you would be familiar with the channel if you're tuning into this, but I am Steven from pokepress. Every month or so, we do a discussion of some sort. I also do usually things on Pokemon Go Community Day and some other stuff. Whenever there's musical stuff happening, I try to work that in there. But if you've never been to one of these before, what we do is we finished up all the movies, at least for now, and we've started doing discussions of the music of Pokemon side games. And tonight we're doing Pokemon Colosseum for the GameCube. It's the second GameCube game. Well, technically we discussed Melee, Smash Brothers already, and last month we did a discussion of, Pokemon Channel. We go, every discussion we try to do a game here, and we're going to talk about sort of the background info on the game, some of the folks behind it, go through a number of songs and sort of what we think about them, and then usually we do a wrap-up followed by a game discussion. So that's about what you can expect here. All right, well, hopefully we get some more folks as time goes on, but you can always give us a comment on one of these videos. We always appreciate that. But I think we're just going to get started. So the way this works is, first of all, I have to get all my little recorder stuff turned on and going, and Anne, you're just about ready for that?
Yes.
Okay. So give that a second, and then we usually do a little pause, and I do an introduction. We kind of go from there. Let me make sure I punch up my notes. By the way, folks at home, if anyone is listening in here, make sure you let us know how our volume levels are. We do a test stream beforehand, but there's always a chance things have drifted in between now and then. You never know quite what you're going to get. All right, so let's see here. Okay, I have my recordings going. Looks like our levels look good. So let's see, leave a little pause, and then we'll kind of go from there. Hi, folks, Steven here. I'm on the phone with Anne from Pikapi Podcast, and this is the next in our series of Pokemon side game music discussions. This time we're talking about the music of Pokemon Colosseum for the GameCube. Of course, this is a successor, at least in some ways, to the Pokemon Stadium games that were on the N64. It does take a fairly different route in terms of its gameplay and structure and stuff like that, and we'll certainly be talking about that. But well, let's get some of the basics down. Let's see. This game was originally released in late 2003 in Japan in November of that year. And then in the North America, it was released in March. And then, actually, let me back up a little bit just to do a little bit of an overview. Sorry about that, folks. Okay. So if you haven't been to one of these before, the way these work is that we discuss some of the background details about the game, our experience with it, some of the folks behind it, and then we talk about a couple songs we've each picked out, and then we usually do a wrap-up, and then in the bonus segment, after all this, we usually do a game discussion. We should be doing all of that today. But let's start with the basics. This game was originally released back in late 2003, November in Japan, and then in March of 2004 in North America, and then May of 2004 in Europe. One interesting thing, we had mentioned in our discussion of Pokemon Channel that there was a bonus disc that was in Japan. Here in North America, there was also a bonus disc if you pre-ordered the game, which had some stuff in it. Nothing too special, some trailers. I think you got a Jirachi you could get for your game, which was kind of nice, but there's other ways to get that now. But as far as my experience with this game originally, I don't remember exactly when I got it. I know I got it during its original thing there. I might have gotten it for Easter that year, given the release date there, or somewhere thereabouts. So that was kind of my experience. I played through a good chunk of the game back then, I'm pretty sure. You may remember that earlier in my channel's history, I did a partial walkthrough of the game. I got through a chunk of it, maybe the first quarter or so. But enjoyed it, like some of the aspects we're going to talk about today. But Anne, what was your sort of experience with this game?
This is a game, like many of the games of this particular era, one that I never owned, but I have played it kind of at conventions, so it kind of has that special feeling for me of like, oh, like, you know, we're gonna go to a big fancy place and play with people I've never met, and it's gonna be an event. So I've played it a lot with other people, kind of around and just at various conventions and like where they set up retro gaming systems and allow you to play for a bit.
Yeah, I do still see it at events, a lot of the major trading card game events back when we had those, and hopefully later this year we'll be having them again. But in any event, there's a company based out of, I believe they're actually based out of Wisconsin on the west side of the state near La Crosse, that runs a lot of the gaming areas at a lot of the major tournaments, and they would have this among many other games in there. Although sort of the catch was on their GameCubes, they didn't have memory cards in them, so you couldn't actually save in there, so you would see the first couple hours of this game. But people still enjoyed playing it for what there was there. So definitely has some legs to it in terms of reputation, and we'll certainly be talking more about that. All right, well, as far as who developed this game, it's a sort of a new face in our look at this. You may remember the Stadium games were developed either by HAL or by some of Nintendo's internal teams. Well, in the interim, they formed a company called Genius Sonority. And that company, they've made a few other things that aren't Pokemon, but they've mostly been making Pokemon games. This was pretty much the first thing that they made as a game. And they also made the follow-up, Gale of Darkness in the GameCube, Battle Revolution, Troze and Shuffle, that sort of side series, and a few other things here and there. So they've been primarily a Pokemon developer, but they do have a few other things like the Denpa games that you might have seen. Looks like they also had like the 100 classic books for DS, where Nintendo took a bunch of public domain books and put them on a DS cart. And things of that nature. And I'm not sure you had too much else to add about Genius Sonority as a company.
Not about Genius Sonority, no.
All right. Well, they've been quite busy, and sorry. Well, with that out of the, well, having said that, the actual music person for this game, and pretty much all of Genius Sonority's games, at least in the Pokemon realm, is Tsukasa Tawada. Obviously, that's a Japanese person. This is, of course, a Japanese studio, and we were able to find some stuff on him. It looks like he was born in 1965, and he did do a fair amount of video game work before this game. His credits date back to sort of the NES/Famicom era. One interesting one I found is that he worked on the Famicom version of Maniac Mansion. Now, I have to be very particular about this. This is not the same port as what we got here in the States for the computer game Maniac Mansion. This is the Japanese Famicom version that came out actually a year or two earlier, strangely enough. But he did the music for that. I wouldn't say it's not maybe the best thing he's ever worked on. I definitely think the music in this game is he's shown some personal growth there. Let's put it that way. He also has some other games with odd lineages, like the NES game Wampum, which started out as a game in Japan based on Journey to the West, but the North American version, for some reason, they changed it to be the Wild West and be starring a Native American character, which is it's kind of weird and probably part of the reason it's kind of lost to history a little bit. Other credits include the Dungeon Master series. He's done some sound design work on Dragon Quest. And let's see, as far as like after he started working at Genius Sonority, one of the things that's not Pokemon he's credited on is Harvest Moon, The Lost Valley. But Anne, you also, we've always both tried to research the musicians involved. What did you find out?
Yeah, so he's a very classically trained pianist. He started playing piano at the age of 2. I can't find anything about, say, where he did his musical education or who might have instructed him. It doesn't seem that he's completely self-taught, but because he's very well trained in the classical style. But it looks like in 1987, he either graduated or began his music career. I'm not sure exactly how to interpret this block of kanji I'm looking at. But by 1992, he moved to Tokyo and started proper work as a recording studio, and the rest is history. But he is very active on social media, actually. He has both a YouTube and a Facebook where he kind of does a travel piano diary, and where he just gets on his piano and plays, and you can see like he really has a lot of skill, both for just piano playing in the classical style and as well as composing for orchestras. So he's a very interesting person. I wish I could find more information about his life before he got to be a composer for movies and video games and media, but he's a very interesting person and very friendly by all accounts.
Yeah. You mentioned his sort of public profile. I was watching a video a day or two before we recorded this about the history of Lugia, and since he worked on the sequel to this, which prominently features Lugia, they asked him some questions and wasn't able to provide all the answers they were looking for, but apparently he does have a bit of a profile out there, so definitely encourage our listeners to look at some of his other stuff in there, both gaming and sounds like there's some others as well. So I should point out he is totally still active. In fact, last year's Genius Sonority Pokemon game was Pokemon Cafe Mix, and he worked on that one as well. So we'll be mentioning him quite a bit in the next dozen or so of these that we do. So active, yep. All right. Well, having gone over that, let's sort of talk about the overall style of the music in the game. I definitely found there was a definite Western quality. I kind of want to say Wild West is refers to a very narrow played history of the United States. And I should definitely say this is definitely Western music, not so much country. Those are related genres of music, but they are distinct. This definitely sounds like stuff that's more associated with, say, with Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and in fact, the region in this game is based on Arizona. I think it's pronounced Ouray or something like that. But the music definitely follows that sort of trend. And one notable thing, although the Stadium games has had some decently well-produced music and like instrumentation quality. They were always limited by what the N64 could do. This one definitely has, it's all sample based, but it's very high quality, and they really went out, not sure exactly what I was going to say out of their way there, but I'm not sure if that's the correct phrase. And my other note that I have for the soundtrack overall is that there is a little bit of some of the Ruby Saturn games in here that's used in the non-story mode of this. That is fairly straight porting with like better, quality instruments, but they didn't take too many liberties with it otherwise. And what are your sort of overall notes on the style of music game?
Yeah, I would agree with what you said in that it has a very Western feel. It kind of, that word works on dual senses, because on the one hand, there's a lot of instrumentation and musical stylings that speak to the American West and like old-timey westerns and cowboys and as you say, Texas, New Mexico, that deserty Sonora area of our country. But also just in his composition style, like we mentioned, he was a classically trained pianist. The way he composes sounds very like European senses of counterpoint and chord progressions, to me more so than some of the other types of music that we have explored in this podcast. So it is definitely a fresh look on Pokemon music that we're getting here today, I think.
Well, yeah, they definitely went in a different direction than the Stadium game into. This is definitely not trying to sound like a band at like a marching band at a stadium, at a college football game, whatever. That is definitely not what they're going for. I would say that the amount of Western, as in, Southwestern influence does vary from song to song. There's some stuff that is very much what you might see in certain types of Western. There's others that have definitely influence there, but it's not quite obvious. So there is some range there, and we'll be talking about that with this, with some of what we've picked out there. Well, speak of which, as usual, each of us has picked out 3 songs. And which 3 did you pick out?
Yes, I have picked out The Outskirts Stand, Mirror Bee's Retro Groove, and Fadine the Fortune Teller.
And so the 3 I picked out were the Friendly Battle, not to be confused with the Normal Battle, which is actually something different. There's a Friendly Battle theme. Let's see. I also picked out Phoenix City, for guessing what real-world city that name might be based off of. And let's see. And the last one I picked was the Relic Forest. So we usually try to go the order that you would experience these in the games, and I think we've got that relatively well nailed down here. So, Anne, looks like you're first, and tell us about the Outskirts Stand and its music.
Right. So the Outskirts Stand is kind of one of the first place where you get a battle, I believe. And it's kind of like, it starts off with a harmonica, and it's kind of the most like Home on the Rangy song in the entire thing, I think. Like it sounds very homey and rustic, and I really love this track just because I also play the harmonica, and it gives you a nice mix between playing the chords on the harmonica and playing single notes, and it's, for all it sounds like very blue collar salt of the earth simple, it's also very intricate, and I rather like it a lot for that reason too.
Yeah, I took a few notes on this one. It is the first kind of real place you go to in the game after an opening cinematic, but it's got a very desolate feeling to it. And I would say where there's the harmonica, especially at the very start, that it's just really just the harmonica and the howling wind. Technically speaking, it is possible, at least online, to listen to this without the background wind noises, but I feel that does give this. It gives it sort of a middle of nowhere type of place, which I think is what they're going for. The actual setting for this part of the game is it's supposed to be like a gas station, but the sort of like the building there is built out of an old locomotive train. I forget what they call it. The first thing on there, the head or whatever, the engine compartment or whatever. And do you agree with some of what I says? Do you agree with some of what I just said there?
Yeah, it's kind of gas station, cantina, sort of like the local farmer hangout sort of thing. I was saying, sorry when I interrupted you. Like, I really think the winds add something to it. But like so much of this game, like this part, like the opening cinematic, and when you get to hear it, looks a lot. I'm getting a lot of like Tatooine from Star Wars type vibes, like the pod racing N64 game. So like this music, I think really did help kind of ground it in its own place and kind of give it that flavor of being removed from that particular, not recollection, that particular sense that I was getting, of being associated with another video game. Like this music kind of put it into a different sort of feel and gave it its own sense of place and time. And yeah,
definitely one of the more American West type of influences there. Some of the other ones do have a little bit of that influence, but this one really does have it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's move on to my first track. This is the Friendly Battle track. And as I said earlier, this is not the same as the normal battle track. This is the Friendly Battle, which means you're not battling someone who is a like shady character or anything like that. But I had some interesting notes on this one. First of all, the song has this soaring quality, which some very bright string work, and then it also has some guitar work. And by guitar, I don't mean an old-timey guitar. I mean an electric guitar. That's kind of one of the reasons I've been hesitant to say Old West or Wild West with some of this, just because the game is very clearly set in something of a modern setting, at least within the Pokemon universe. So it's not old-timey necessarily, a lot of the music. There is still a little bit of that frontier/Western quality, and this definitely has that. Kind of one thing I wanted to compare it to was the normal battle theme from the Pokemon trading card game for Game Boy that we talked about a ways back. Because this song does fill a similar niche, and that's used for a lot of battles within the game, but it has a much different energy to it. They both work, but this one is more bright and stuff like that, and energetic. And does that kind of make sense there?
Yes. Oh, energetic is the right word, and that electric guitar, it's just so good. It really revs you up for your battle with some Zigzagoons.
Yeah, that is the first place. You will hear it a number of other places. Basically, anytime you're not battling someone who is someone who might have a shadow Pokemon, this is the theme you'll hear for a lot of those encounters. But it certainly makes the battle exciting. And it still does have a little bit of that Western edge to it in terms of especially the strings. Obviously the guitar, not so much. But Anne, any other thoughts on this track?
I'm not sure what to say. It's one of the tracks that we picked that doesn't have like separate movements, like orchestral movements. In like we'll talk about that probably on my on some of the tracks coming up. But it is a track that kind of seems to stay on its same motif throughout, which is interesting. I love it a lot, though. It's so good.
Yeah. Reading through a lot of the comment threads on some of these songs, there were a lot of fans of this, and actually a lot of rearrangements, more so than definitely than Hey You Pikachu and some of the other games that we've covered. All right, well, this isn't quite in order, but I think we wanted to alternate this time around. So, Anne, your next song is Fadine the Fortune Teller, one of several, I would say, colorful characters you meet in this game. Tell us a little bit about this.
Yes. So this is a very um interesting track. Like, it starts off like there's bells and it's creepy, but it also has like this beautiful little flute going on in sort of almost a major key melody, and then it dips back into creepy again. So yeah, she's a and then it kind of like has a pause, and it's like a Twilight Zone theme almost. So this is a song that goes in several different places, and you're just put a little bit on edge all the way throughout.
Yeah, so the purpose of this character within the game is like a lot of like other fortune tellers you might find in video games. She sort of tells you where to go next if you're kind of stuck. Is sort
Mm-hmm.
of the functional purpose. There might be one or two other reasons you go in there during the game, but that's kind of the main reason. As far as the music, I put down there is sort of a, even though it might be a little bit off, not off putting, but a little bit mysterious and stuff. It does kind of pull you in a little bit there. Is that something you found, Dan?
Yeah, like it's very intriguing, and this is again one of those tracks. Like, I wouldn't say it has like three distinct movements necessarily like another track I'm going to talk about, but it definitely, like, it doesn't loop. It's a long track. It's like a full 2 minutes, and it goes many different places. Like, you've got the Twilight Zone thing, you've got the pretty happy flute, you've got the weird eerie synthy thing. It keeps moving so that you keep wanting to hear what comes next, but it's also unsettling because it's a lot of odd minor chords and interesting note combinations, but it's very pretty.
And just as you were kind of talking about, fortune tellers, they have this is the way they do business sort of thing. I don't know if they're going to do something good, something bad, some of both. Sort of try to, the certain level of brings you in there, but also kind of, not sure exactly if I can put that in words, but did you kind of get what I was saying there? It does reflect her purpose,
Yes.
her character.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You never know where she's gonna send you, or
So also occurred to me. Any other thoughts on?
I think we've talked about it all. Like, I just, it's something a little bit different when it comes to this soundtrack, and it's again one of those few tracks that doesn't have the sort of southern, southwestern flavor to it in the same way that, say, the other tracks do.
Yeah, other ones do. This is definitely one of the more one ones, I suppose. Thematics work for what it was intended for.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, now I picked out is Phoenix City, and this is sort of the bright, shiny, very nice place you would actually live city in this game, as opposed to some of the other locations which are more down. But as far as the music, but as far as it goes musically, the thing I found most interesting about this track is that there are two sections: a slow string-based section towards the beginning. Midway through, it changes faster, and then it sort of loops. It definitely reflects the character city being very peaceful, and also sort of the of I don't know center of business is the right way to say it, but sort of the I'm not sure exactly where I wanted to go with that. But Anne, what were your kind of thoughts on this track?
Yeah, and it is very much the same. Like, this is kind of one of the ones I'm talking about where it has two very distinct movements to it, and you as you say, it has that soft, very peaceful, very beautiful, like we're sitting down for some classical music orchestral, like this is a nice clean town or city, and then it has something much more exciting and active, and that harmonica's back and it's busy and bustling, So it kind of reflects the two aspects of this city. And the longer you're there, the more things happen, and the more wild it starts getting. So yeah, like it very much reflects the city and the plot of what happens in that city, I think.
One other thing I wanted to mention with the two part, I don't know if this was ever the case, but the GameCube does have an internal clock that keeps track of time, and I do wonder if at one point they were considering having a day-night cycle depending on the real-time clock. It does seem like one of these is definitely more of a night theme, maybe that first part, although I guess there might be a bit of a sunrise quality to it. And that second part is maybe more of a daytime thing. I'm not sure. Anne, any thoughts on that idea?
Hard to say what they were thinking, but that's an awesome idea, and I could definitely see a case being made for it, how you could make that work. It would be very fun and exciting.
And when you have, not just an A section and a B section, but two very different sections, more or less work together and flow into each other, it does kind of beg question a little bit as to why, but I had no idea if that was actually ever planned for this, but
it's hard to say, but again, it's hard to say why exactly, but again, knowing that he is very classically trained as a pianist, it doesn't surprise me that he'd compose in that way too, where you develop a theme in one movement and then you develop a completely separate theme in another movement, and then maybe by the third they start pulling together, sort of a thing. So in some ways it's not surprising. In other ways, maybe, as you say, it was indicative of some other game mechanics that they were playing with. It could be either at this point.
Yeah. So it would be interesting to know that, and maybe we'll find out in time. But let's go on to Anne's third pick. We mentioned that there were a number of color characters in this game. You picked the one that might well be the most colorful. And it's Mir B's team, and he's definitely a character. Why don't you talk a little bit about this?
Okay, so set the scene. You're going through like a basement into some sort of warehouse-like thing. Everything's gray and there's like giant fans, and suddenly this dude in full disco regalia and a afro that's dyed two different colors like Sia comes out and starts getting down to some Latin grooves. Like there's a human voice interjection, there's Ludicolo's dancing. The song is beautiful and it's chaos. It is all Latin rhythms and fun, and a little weird given that he is not dressed for that type of music. He's dressed for something very different, but at the same time he is so fun. I cannot fault him. He is living his best life.
Well, you mentioned Star Wars earlier. They did make disco out of Star Wars, so I'm sure there was some salsa variant of disco as well. That is not what this track really is. It's definitely more of a Latin/salsa track, and it's got a definite energy to it. To be honest, I think this character, I think you see him once or twice before this scene there, but yeah, this is sort of his big introduction. I do think he's sort of filling a role, going back to the trading card game for Game Boy, very similar to Imakuni, although he is, Mir B is definitely part of the bad guy team, or one of the teams in this game. So maybe that was one reason, or maybe Imakuni wasn't available, or they just wanted to go a different way there. But do you kind of get a similar vibe there from this, even though the music is different and the character is definitely different?
Definitely that vibe of like the one guy on the evil bad guy team who is just larger than life. Like for Team Rocket, it is Jesse and James. For like Imakuni, and like it's just, there's always one who's just over the top and is a bad guy, but you kind of end up loving them anyway. That's this guy. He brings fun to the evil plot.
Yeah, so not sure how much else. What did you think of sort of you mentioned the vocals? Let me just restart that. You mentioned the vocal samples in there. What do you think about using this? That's pretty much the only track in this game that has any sort of vocal samples, aside from like one other that's also based on this. What do you think about all that?
I think it works for this track. It's very fun, and I kind of might have liked to see it used in other tracks, but like it kind of fits this particular character in his kind of boss fight scenario where we pull out all the stops, it's go big or go home. He's definitely the kind of character that you could see singing along to this music. I think it works. I would like to explore it further for other tracks if I were on the design team and we were remaking this game. I like it a lot.
Yeah, and I should point out, even though the character is a bit of a joke character, definitely not necessarily an easy battle. The rain team that he runs can actually be pretty difficult if you because of the way the game's structured. So, not necessarily a pushover either. But I just knew we would have to talk about this. I definitely said when I didn't have this on my list, I really pressured Anne, to be honest, to make sure. I'm guessing she probably would have picked it anyway, but
oh, you really twisted my arm. Like it was so hard to bring out the dude with the afro.
All right. Well, I've got one more track in this discussion. Let's see. Sorry about that. Well, I got one more track to pick out, and this is the Relic Forest. So in one of the cities here, it's sort of the more off to the side, sort of, it's almost kind of a retirement community, I think is kind of what it is. But sort of towards the bottom of the town, you can go through this cave, and you wind up in this place that has this like obelisk or whatever it is, where you actually purify your shadow Pokemon that you catch. We'll talk more about some of the other mechanics in our post discussion. But there's a tune here that is really that is extremely peaceful by design, I'm sure. It opens up with this sort of harp. It opens up with a harp. I don't know if arrangement is the right word, but basically a harp part, and there's also some strings and woodwinds in there. It's definitely one of the more pleasant ones. The commons, when I would look this one up, there were a lot of comparisons to like Sheik's theme from Legend of Zelda and stuff like that. And what kind of impression did this song give you?
It's like a lullaby. It reminds me of a lot of music my mom used to play when we were very little kids. Like she'd turn on the big cassette player or CD player in the living room and play like soft, soothing music, sometimes classical, for us to go to sleep to. This sounds like something she would have played. Like it's so soothing. Like I didn't think of Legend of Zelda, Sheik's theme, or anything like that, but now that you bring it up, like it sounds like it would not be out of place in a Zelda game too. It's just very soft and quiet and peaceful and intricate as well.
Yeah, and I should point out that one of the items you get a limited number of in this game is something called the Time Flute, which you can use to instantly purify a Pokemon by summoning Celebi in order to do that. And that obviously kind of fits with the forest theme. It does feel like they're referencing some other parts of the franchise there. Any thoughts in that area, Anne?
Very much so. Like, yeah, it's not Celebi's theme exactly, but it's giving off very much that vibe of Celebi and the Hidden Forest and movie 4 in general. And yeah, like that flute that you hear in the track ties to the flute you can find in the game, and well done. A+.
Yeah, so definitely a very calming track, and let me see, how do I want to transition from there? Yeah, so it definitely fits the purpose. You're going to be visiting that area a fair bit during the game, so you're going to hear a fair bit. Sorry. Yeah, so, I'm trying to think I want to see here. Sorry, folks.
It's all good.
It's definitely something that fits in there. And there's by Pokemon, there's a little fanfare that plays, and it's a little bit reserved there as well. So I think it all kind of fits together to give that a good sense of place within the game. All right, well, I guess we sort of go over our overall. Sorry. So I guess we sort of give our overall impressions of the music there. We sort of talk about. Sorry, I always wanted this segment, and it's always hard to describe. So give me a second.
It's all good.
So, having talked about a number of songs, we should give our overall opinion then of the music in this game. Kind of skipped over some of the other stuff. There's no like announcer in this game like there was in the first couple Stadium games. Even in the non-story mode, there's really an announcer if you go into that part of the game. So, and no real voice acting to speak of. I don't even think Pikachu's voice is really in the usual Pokemon cries and stuff like that, and sound effects in the game. So, going on to an overall opinion of the game, I think they did a pretty good job here. The production quality, a lot more on the GameCube with the additional storage space and whatnot that they couldn't do in N64. And they obviously put a lot of effort into coming up with an overall sound, but still having some range there. We haven't got some of the more like high places that you game, and those still do work within sort of the confines of this. But I think they put together something pretty good here. And what's sort of your overall opinion?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just a very beautiful soundtrack. I love the direction they went and the qualities to it. It's just beautiful music, and I think a lot of people agree that it has a lot of remix potential. It's beautiful for like piano practice. It's or like different arrangement potential, and like it's lovely to listen to a lot of these tracks just by themselves outside of gameplay too. I think, if we're going to be fair, like you mentioned way back at the beginning, this is probably not his best work, and I would agree that like there might be more, in hindsight you could have done to sort of make things more cohesive or lean a little harder into that musical Southwesty theme and have it translate across the tracks a bit more. But overall, this is just such a beautiful piece of work, and like I'm just really impressed with this game.
Actually, I think you remembered what I said there. I was actually saying his work on the Famicom version. That's okay. This sounds. No, I was saying at the beginning his work on Famicom version of Maniac Mansion is that he was just like that was in '88, so he was probably like just out of his music training there and getting used to how computerized music works there. It's not horrible or anything, but it isn't. If you listen to that and listen to this, you could definitely see some definite growth in his skill level there. Is what I was actually saying with that. Now, this is definitely. I can't say, obviously the more time you spend on something, the more you can do with it, and maybe, if this had kept cooking, but it was still very good. I do not want to, I want to be clear about that. This is some really good work in this game, and re-listening to it now gave me a greater appreciation for it. So just to be very clear.
Yeah, no, it's lovely. All the tracks.
Yeah, and it's especially impressive. The music in this game is on the scale of what would be produced like the original game, but done on more complex implementations, on more advanced hardware and whatnot. So, real good work on it. I don't know exactly how much time he had to work with on this. Pretty good job. All right. Well, we don't have any feedback to go over, unfortunately. That does sometimes. But if you have comment on this or any of our discussions, if you're watching this in video, you can always give us a comment on the video. Otherwise, you can always drop me a line at pokepress@gmail.com. We always like to get those comments and put them into our discussions. Doesn't matter if you saw this the day after it was live streamed or a year down the road or more. We always love your comments, and we'll try and work them into a future discussion. All right, so what's our next episode going to be? Well, we don't quite know for sure. We do know what the next Pokemon game is. If we end up doing that, that will be Pokemon Dash for the Nintendo DS. Yes, believe it or not, there's actually a bit of a gap before the next side games comes out, and the sort of early DS game Pokemon Dash is next up on side game queue as a result. But there's another thing coming up that we might need to do, that we will, but there is another thing coming up that we will do an episode on, and depending on when it's out, that will maybe throw a wrench into our schedule. So obviously we're coming up, recording this at the end of January 2021, and we don't know exactly when Secrets of the Jungle, the next Pokemon movie, will debut in the West. There is a good chance it will happen at the end of February, possibly on Pokemon Day, but we haven't heard anything as of yet. So our next episode will probably either Pokemon Dash for the Nintendo DS or Secrets of the Jungle. Either way, you get to both of those. Until then, Anne, thank you very much for being on.
Thank you.
All right, folks, thanks. And we'll leave a little bit of a pause there, and we'll do our game discussion. Actually, a fair bit to talk about mechanically with this game, so.
Okay.
We've got some interesting comparisons to other parts of the franchise, both time and newer, actually. Okay, so moving on to the game discussion, there's actually a fair number of things I wanted to talk about with this game. I think the first thing we should definitely talk about is that this game places a very heavy emphasis on double battles. We're a new feature in Generation 3 in this game. In the story mode, you're pretty much always playing a double battle. And what are your sort of general thoughts on double battles in Pokemon?
I love them. I really like them a lot. I wouldn't say I necessarily have mastered the crafty techniques to make the most use of them, and the ways certain Pokemon's attacks can kind of buff the other and the like. But I'm always really happy in a main series game whenever I get to have a double battle. So that's a part of this game that I really liked, was I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've been pretty positive on double battles as well. I know some folks really prefer single battles, and that's what's used in some of, well, the official Pokemon tournament format is generally all doubles if you look at the VGC championships and whatnot. But I know some folks really do prefer singles, and if you do, that's okay, and this probably isn't going to be the game for you then. It is kind of interesting. They really did try to push these out, even in like Gen 3, and I don't know when they stopped really doing it, but there were 2 versus 2 rules officially, like for the trading card game that they tried out there, and they even made some cards that tried to make use of that. So that was a big push here. And you definitely had to think a little bit differently, especially with moves like Earthquake that affect all the other Pokemon and stuff like that. So, yeah. Let's see. So definitely this sort of put that, sorry. So making a whole game about it really kind of shows their dedication and their desire to get that out there. So we had talked here and there about shadow Pokemon. Sorry. So next thing I want to talk about was shadow Pokemon. We had mentioned them here and there, but sort of the gist, since there are no wild Pokemon in this game, you have to catch these shadow Pokemon that appear here and there that the Successor evil team has created and given to various folks throughout the game, and your companion Rui can detect these, and then you have to try and catch them and stuff, and that's how you actually build your team in this game. But once you catch them, you have to go through a fairly long process of purification before you can finally do that finishing step in the relic forest that we talked about. I don't know, Anne. How do you kind of feel about that?
Mixed, because on the one hand, it's an idea like the idea of shadow Pokemon or Pokemon that have been turned to evil by various evil teams and their wrongdoings and then have to be rescued, basically. Like, that's a conceit in the Pokemon franchise that's been used before in various games, various anime. Um, and again, I'm just mixed on it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This one kind of fell a little bit in between. I much prefer to battle wild Pokemon and catch them that way. Like I don't love that you're rescuing the Pokemon and it's how you build your team. And it felt a little less straightforward as a game mechanic. And it was, I don't know, it was different. But again, it's always nice to try something new in a Pokemon game. So I'm here for that.
I was actually more asking. That was a good answer, Anne. And I got some. That was a fun answer, Anne. But I was actually more interested in the actual process of getting the gauge down, because it starts out full, and then as it goes down, you get access to more moves and stuff like that. What you said is definitely a valid take, but I was more interested in the mechanics. There's about 4 or 5 ways you can bring that gauge down. Most of it, a lot of it is either, let's see, a couple of ways you can do it as part of a battle. You also get some credit for walking around. There's a daycare. There are some sense you can use to sort of bring the gauge down, but you do have to bring. If you're going to use one of your precious time flutes, you do have to bring it all the way down before you finish purification, and then you can actually they'll get their experience that they had built at that point. They'll finally get them. They can even evolve then and stuff like that. But that's actually kind of a common criticism of this game, is that a lot of folks feel it's too hard or takes too long to get that gauge down. Any thoughts in that area?
I would agree with that. Yeah, that was a bit of a frustration where you have to either use them in battle or walk places or use the flute or go to the relic. Was it the relic forest? Yeah, that was a problem. Again, I'm not sure what you would do better, but
there are a couple options. You have a number of options in this game. It's just that all are a little bit on the tedious side, at least to me and to other folks. But there are other ways of doing it. When we get to the sequel, Gale of Darkness, that uses it has some of the same stuff, but it also has some additional systems that lets you purify Pokemon more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk more about the game comparison. There's one other place similar mechanic, and when they started the team stuff in there, could enter a grunt, and then Pokemon, you would catch it, and then you lose in a fairly different way. Able to do slow down with them, but usually what you do is send a couple key and some Stardust, and just purify to learn the move return. I don't know how much of that have you used, or how much work with the Shadow Pokemon have you done in Pokemon Go?
Oh, I've not done any work with Shadow Pokemon in Pokemon Go. That's a thing.
Yeah, indeed it is, yeah. So, yeah.
No, I'm not.
Rescue them from the Team Rocket person.
Oh, right, yeah. No, I've not.
That's okay, but I'd be remiss if I did not. I'd be remiss if I hadn't mentioned it here, so. As something, I don't know exactly how inspired they were, because it does work a little differently, but it is underlying it a similar concept.
Okay.
Let's talk about sort of the setting. We've many times, I called it the modern West, because there's some stuff that is not from the old West, from the 1800s or when that was. One of the interesting things about it is that the place is kind of desolate, like a lot of the Southwest is. But there are other aspects of the franchise. Notably, this came out around the same time as the Jirachi Wishmaker movie, especially in the West. I think they were well timed together, and that uses a similar desert setting. What are your kind of thoughts on that, Anne?
Yeah, like they could have been just piggybacking off of the location scouting sort of situation, using similar inspirations. Yeah, when the electric guitar came in for Friendly Battle, like it almost like stopped being Old West and kind of more of a Mad Max feel with like broken down, covered in sand relics and things like that. I definitely see some potential connection to Jirachi Witchmaker and a lot of the images and still frames that come out of that movie. A lot of the settings and the background map headings and the like. It's anyone's guess how connected they were, but there is some of those locations in the movie, some similar vibes.
And I suppose it's also worth mentioning, some of this stuff is derived from the Western film genre, both in terms of like the musical influence and some of the settings and stuff like that. And of course, one staple of the Western movie is the showdown. Now, usually that involves firearms of some sort. Here, of course, it's all done with Pokemon, so I think there's a little bit that sort of fits in with the aesthetic as well.
Sort of showdown at high noon kind of feel.
Yeah, so I think that's also worth mentioning. Sort of the next thing I want to talk about is we had mentioned, of course, Fadine and Near B. This game has quite a cast of interesting characters, to say the least. We didn't mention like the TV show, underground TV show host Venus, which for some reason they had to make up that classic song. I'm Your Venus is referenced in there for some reason. And a few other characters in there. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what I have to say about that, but I figured it was worth mentioning. There's an interesting ensemble of characters in this game.
That is kind of like there's a kind of a middle ground in this game between like the stadium games and a general main series games. And one of the things that I enjoyed about this that kind of tied back to main series style gameplay was a lot of very colorful NPCs that have their own life going on, and you kind of enjoy talking to all of them, whether or not they actually give you anything. They're just fun to talk to. And that is a staple of Pokemon games, I think, in the main series, is that the NPCs are fun regardless of whether they further the plot or give you items or whatever. It's just kind of fun to chat with them. So that was something I liked about this. Definitely some of them are a little more offbeat than usual in this game, but...
Yeah, they went some interesting places. Let's, I guess, say that is one way to put it. So, one thing I wouldn't call this a pitch or anything, but I wanted to discuss, we had mentioned Western films, which, definitely did get shown in Japan. They definitely would have at least some familiarity with that genre of film this game borrows some things from. I do kind of wonder if this could maybe be adapted into, if that Pokemon Cinematic Universe ever becomes a thing, would this make a good candidate for adapt to a movie? I think it's got some nice settings, it's got some interesting characters. There's aspects of the game, like your character Wes, the main male character that you play as, doesn't really have a flaw in backstory. I'd probably have to divulge things there to make that work. But Anne, if they want to adapt this, you think it would make a good candidate?
I think there's a lot of potential here. Generally, a lot of Pokemon games I've thought in the past could use like a story, a cinematic or TV telling, just because there's so much there to work with. And this is one of those games. And I remember reading in the comments, like, of a lot of other people were very impressed by the plot of this game. I don't know that it's necessarily the best Pokemon has ever come up with, but there is a lot of cinematic potential. And the game opens with like a cutscene even. There's a lot to work with. There's definitely a good solid through line and interesting locales and interesting characters and some real stakes to build off of. I think it could make a very fun movie if someone wanted to give that a go.
One thing you might do to switch things up, though, you want to actually tell the movie from like Rui's perspective. That might give the narrative a little bit of a different, a little bit of a shift there that might make things a little more interesting. I just wanted to kind of throw that one out there. But yeah, I think this is perhaps one of the better candidates in that regard. So, but overall, it's definitely got some rough edges around some of the mechanical aspects. I think most notably the purification stuff, which gets better in XD, or at least easier in XD, is an area. Sorry. Certainly the purification side of things, getting that gauge down, is something that was improved in XD. But definitely have enjoyed playing this over the years, and I get the feeling you like it as well.
I do enjoy it. I do enjoy it a lot.
All right, well, let's see, how do I want to transition from that? Well, thanks for listening, folks.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, I think that should be good there. We made some pretty decent time on this one. I guess when there are lyrical songs like there were with Pokemon Channel, that was one thing that took up more time there, was talking. We have to analyze not only the music and the instruments, but also the lyrics. That adds some time. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Secrets of the Jungle.
Yes.
If they produce a number of like new English insert songs for the dub of that, that's gonna, potentially give us a lot to talk about. In there. So not sure what's going to happen with that. I did ask. I assume, Anne, that by now you've heard about the whole like music 25 year anniversary stuff they're doing, how they've drafted Katy Perry and stuff like that.
I hadn't heard that last one.
Really?
I had heard. Well, for mental health reasons, I have not been online as much as I often am. So I've missed a lot. The world's on fire still. I'm sure it's fine. But that sounds exciting. I don't know how Katy Perry is gonna go in this particular setting, but I'm sure it will be big and colorful, and for that, I'm here for it.
Yeah. Don't know if that has anything to do with the movie whatsoever, if they're doing anything there. That would be interesting.
That would be, like, usually the US does not get such a big name to do, like, the ending theme, but that would be exciting.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. I did kind of ask, and I said, yeah, this probably isn't a question you can answer yet to the press folks. But I did try to let them know that, I don't expect to be high enough on the totem pole to interview Katy Perry or anything like that, but I definitely would love to talk to some label reps or to writers or stuff like that if they're interested, to sort of show that side of it. So we'll see what happens there. But Anne, thank you very much for coming in.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, folks. Thanks. See you around again.
Thanks.
Hopefully when we get closer to sometime next month, we'll figure out what's going to go on with our next discussion. All right. Thanks, folks.